Hello there, it's Toots here, and I am here today to show you how to build my full ultimate sorting system. Now, if you watched my original video, you should have a pretty good sense of all of the different features, but just to kind of go over those again, it takes pretty much any item type, it works at 2 times hopper speed, it incorporates category sorting as well as bulk item sorting with shulker compression. And so this version of the system allows for 53 different item categories as well as bulk item types. I'll initially be taking you through just the necessary stuff, and then we'll layer on some additional features. And in this tutorial, I'm actually going to assume instead of having all of this empty space down here that you're digging out of solid dirt. So something I want to recommend for all of you is, if you don't already have it, to get Litematica. Now this is also going to require you to have Fabric as well, so I'm going to add a couple of links in the description to help you get started with that. But this is a great tool because it allows you to save pretty much anything you find in your world to a schematic, which you can then paste somewhere else and use as a guide to accompany the tutorial, just to make sure that you're not making any major mistakes. But personally, I think this is one of the most helpful mods, and I think probably one of the best mods for Redstone. So I have the original full system here for you to grab and build a schematic from. But I also have come up with an upgraded version, which I'm calling 2.1. So there are a handful of improvements. I think for one, it has capacity for 5 more categories and 5 more bulk item types. It allows for faster sorting cycles by removing some of the collision with the minecart that happens underneath. And it also has a prototype that I've made to help deal with some of the overflow. So if you're interested in this 3.1 version of the system, you need to make a bunch of changes that start at the beginning. And in that case, I would absolutely recommend you grab a schematic of this from the world save, and then use the tutorial to kind of guide you through some of the individual steps, like setting up the Allay chamber, configuring the filter chests, or doing the rails. So as a first step, I would recommend that you grab a schematic, save either the 2.0 version or the 2.1 version, and then bring that on over to wherever you plan on building it. Now we're going to go ahead and jump on into the tutorial. So as we're starting off here, the most important thing to do is figure out which direction we're going to be facing while we build this, and then also where we want the system to be located within the chunks. We use the floor templates here in these 2 versions where we have every single block marked out on the floor for the chunk, but we really only need to mark the corners here. So first off, check the direction that you're facing. We can see here that we're facing west. You can really face any direction when you make this system. It doesn't really matter. The only thing that it'll change is the curved rail configurations. But I will take you through all of that stuff later once we get to it. So we're facing west here in my build, and all we need to do here is hit F3 and G to bring the chunk borders up. We're going to pick a central chunk, and so you can see that's going to be this one right here in the middle, and then we're just going to go down and mark out the corners on the floor. So we're going to go ahead and repeat this process for all of the chunks surrounding this central one. Now, I like to use an alternative color for adjacent chunk borders, but you can really do this however you like. And so at this point, we can go ahead and hit F3 and G again to turn off the chunk borders. We don't really need those anymore. And we're just going to go ahead and start putting down our chests. I find this to be the most helpful first step because it's just going to sort of help us figure out where everything else needs to be relative to that, and it'll keep us from making any major mistakes later on. We're going to start by putting down chests in the top right chunk here. So we've got the central one here. And this is just going to go 1 block inside of the chunk here. You can just use this as a sort of helpful guideline here. And then we're just going to be building 28 of these out in this direction here. And then we're just going to go back and then make those double chests, of course. And we have our right side of chests done. Now we're going to move 1 block diagonally from this chest right here. And then we're going to put down our chest that will be on our sort of back wall. And we're just going to have 25 of these. And same as before, we're just going to fill those out to double chests. And then go ahead and double check the numbers there just to make sure you've got everything right. Now, if you like, you can go ahead and start putting down hoppers. We're going to be working on this right side first. So these are actually going to be the double chests for the bulk storage section. So what we're going to have to do next is dig out some trenches behind these double chests on both sides, and then build up the double speed shulker fillers, as well as the item filters behind that. So dropping down, we're going to go to this right side here and go 1 block behind this hopper and to the right. And we're going to go ahead and dig down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks. Then we're going to go ahead and do that on the other side here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks again. And then from this spot, we're going to go 13 back. So 1, 2, like this. So you can see this is going to be 14 blocks in total here. And so you're just going to want to go ahead and do this on the other side as well. Now that we've dug out all of our initial trenches, we're just going to want to go down and connect all of them by digging out this whole area. And so when you're done, you should have a big pit that looks a little bit like this. So we're going to go ahead and time-lapse through this other side here, and I just want to show you that it's going to be the exact same process as it was over here. You're just going to dig down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels, and then dig back 13 more. And then you'll go back over to the other side, go down 1 and to the right, dig down 5, and then back 13. Now that we've dug out the tunnels here, we can go ahead and start putting down our soul sand and blue ice or packed ice. And so we're going to want to start here with 1 soul sand block, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9 blocks of blue ice or packed ice, and then we're just going to go ahead and continue that all the way down to the other side. Ultimately, when you're done, you should have something that looks a little bit like this, where you have soul sand and then 9 blocks of blue ice or packed ice, and the width should match up exactly with the hoppers here. When you're done with both sides, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. So this is going to be the path that our shulker boxes move along when they're full. They get broken, then sent down a water stream up to a bubble elevator here, and then flow into the chest from there. So we are just basically going to be building up the sides here to make sure nothing spills out. You can use any block that you like. I like to use glass, but we're just going to fill up the sides like this, and then you can do the back in the same exact block. But personally, I like to use lighting blocks just because I think they tend to look a little bit nicer. And same as before, we're just going to finish up this other side here. As you might imagine, we're going to need something to stop the water here right before we put up our bubble columns. At this point, we can also surround the front side because we know there's going to be water flowing through there. And we should have something that looks a bit like this. At this point, we can go ahead and start building out the redstone. Put a note block with an observer running out of it into a dropper, and then lastly, get a powdered snow bucket and put a block of powdered snow there. And so we're just going to be copying and pasting this design all the way down to the end here, and same thing on the other side. But instead of doing this one level at a time for 53 of these slices, I'm just going to be doing 5 or 6 of these side by side. I think it makes it easier to understand what we're doing and how all of these pieces of redstone interact with each other. And so then all we're going to be doing next is putting a solid block on top of the note block, run a comparator into it, and then put down some hoppers into the dropper. So next we're going to take some sticky pistons and put them up against these hoppers. And we are not going to attach any blocks to them yet, but we're going to go out 2 blocks, put a iron block here, and a dropper facing up, just like this. So 2 blocks of gap, iron block, touching an upward facing dropper. And then we are just going to continue this all the way down. Now to make this a little bit more survival friendly, I'm going to skip a level here, and we are going to put 2 temporary blocks here and put a downward facing observer. We can break these blocks here, put a redstone block on this side with the hopper, and then put a downward facing dropper on the other side with the sticky piston. And so we're just going to kind of go down the line here like this. Okay, so now the reason why we do this is because we're going to be putting some redstone down here, and it's going to update this observer, which is going to fire off the piston. And we don't want it to push any blocks in and out of place. We can just put those down later. So we are just going to go and put down redstone over all of this stuff here. With the redstone in place, we are no longer going to be updating these observers, and that means that we can go ahead and attach upward-facing observers into these sticky pistons. And so now we can go ahead and start filling in this middle layer. It's just going to consist of a double chest with a hopper running into it from that dropper up top, a solid block connected to that hopper, repeater running out of it, and then an upward-facing observer. And so you should wind up with something that looks a bit like this in the end. So next we're going to take a dropper, put it on top of this observer, face it into an upward facing dispenser, take a hopper and point it into this dropper here, and then take another hopper and point it into this dropper in the back. So dropper, dispenser, hopper, and then another hopper again on this other side. So next we're going to go back to this corner, put a barrel on top of that hopper, put a piston right up against it. Now you're going to want to take an empty shulker and place it on top of each one of these dispensers. From that shulker, we're going to put a comparator. Now it's very important that these shulkers are empty, so make sure that there's no signal coming out of it. And then you're going to be putting a solid block coming out of the comparator. Now you can also take the opportunity here to put empty shulker boxes inside of these barrels. You want to make sure that none of the slices run out of shulkers here. You can feed them in later at the end, but I think it's also just as easy to do it now at this point. And so once we're done with all that, we can go ahead and place a junk block up here above the shulker like this, and have a dropper up against it facing down into this shulker. This is ultimately what's going to be filling the shulker with items. We can break the junk block, and then we're just going to go down the line and have this downward facing row of droppers. From there, we are going to put solid blocks on this side over here above the comparators. More comparators on top of these iron blocks. Solid blocks coming out of the comparators. And then ultimately redstone torches running out of those blocks. Then we're going to want to go to the other side and put some hoppers facing into those droppers. The next thing we'll be doing is putting a hopper facing down into this dropper here, and then another hopper facing forward on top of this hopper that we have down here. Then we're going to go ahead and place a note block with an observer running out of it on this side, and then another observer running in the opposite direction with a solid block attached. So downward facing hopper, another hopper into it, note block, observer, and then another observer into a solid block. Now, at this stage of the game, we need to make sure that we have a hopper chain feeding into all of these barrels that feeds in from this left side over here. So we're going to put in some hoppers facing into the barrels like this first. And then we're going to have another chain of hoppers above it running to the very end. And you can put a barrel here, but you can also just put a hopper here too. And it looks like I missed one on the end, so also don't forget this one here. We're mostly done with the shulker loaders at this point. We're going to need to build some stuff up on the backside to finish it, but before we do that, we're going to build up the item filters on the other end. And so that is mostly just going to involve putting a half slab out of this barrel or hopper, a repeater on top of it, a solid block behind it, another one in front of it, a redstone torch out of that block there, another block on top of the repeater, slab coming out of that block, a solid block coming out of the slab, and then moving to the hoppers here, we're going to have a downward facing one right here, and then a forward facing hopper going into it. So once we're done with all this on the front, we're going to flip on to the back side here, and we want to put down powered rails that run in this direction along each slice. Now the problem with that is when we put down rails next to this one, they're going to run in the opposite direction, which is obviously a problem. So the way we resolve that is by putting down some junk blocks behind the solid ones, and first placing a powered rail there. So we're going to do it like this. We're going to put down a powered rail here on the temporary block, and then another one facing in this direction on the solid block. And this will allow us to keep these rails parallel instead of running into one single rail that goes down. But this pattern of doing it from the junk block to the solid block will work no matter what direction you're facing. From there, you're going to want to put down an observer pointed into a solid block. And then we will just continue this all the way down. So with everything in place on the backside, we're now officially done with the shulker loaders, and we can focus on the double speed filters in the front. We'll need to start by putting down an anvil and renaming two different sets of items with custom names. We're going to have upper filters and lower filters. You can give them any name you like though. So we're going to go back up to the top here, finish out the filter by putting a comparator out, and then redstone dust all the way down to the solid block here, and then put a hopper down right behind that comparator. So the way this is going to work is we're going to first determine the item that we want to filter for. In this case, it'll be cobblestone. We're going to place a stack of it here in that first slot, and then we're going to fill the rest of the slots with our lower filter item. Now, instead of having these lower filters, you can also put stacks of cobblestone here instead, but this is a little bit more resource efficient. Then for the upper filter, we're going to place items in each one of these slots just like this, and then we'll place cobblestone in this first slot right here. And this should run all the way down until we get to 41 or 40. And so we're just going to continue this, moving all the way down. So downward facing hopper, comparator, redstone running down, set up the lower hopper first. We're going to put stone in this time. Fill in the upper filter slots here, and then drop in another stack of the next item. So with all of the bulk item filters set up, we can flip on over to the other side and put down a row of blue ice or packed ice here. Then we're going to drop on down to the bottom underneath everything and start setting up all of the water paths. It might also be worth it at this point to just go ahead and build up your second row of double chests here for the bulk storage. This will make things a little bit easier in terms of setting up the bubble elevators to feed directly in here. In survival mode, we really only need 2 water buckets here. We would just place one down here in the corner, and then another one 2 blocks away to make our infinite water source in the middle. And so we'd grab water here, and then we can go down 2 more spaces to place our water source, and just keep grabbing from this left side here, and go out 2 blocks each time. You shouldn't have any dips in the water like this. make sure that you fill all of those gaps in. And just take this all the way down. Once we're done with that, we can go ahead and drop down and build up this bubble elevator. We're just going to put down water sources over all of these soul sand blocks here. Just like this. And then we're going to alternate between building up a layer of glass around this bubble elevator area. And then we're going to place down a level of water sources right after that. And then we're just going to alternate back and forth pretty much. Now, once we've built up this back wall, all we're going to need to do is build out 2 extra blocks like this, and then have a extra block of glass in front of the hoppers just like this. Go ahead and place your water source on the back block here, and you'll see that it looks like it's not flowing over to the hopper. Now, all you've got to do is just fill out the rest of this area, and then it'll update and the water will flow exactly where we need it to go. And then right as we fill in these last ones, right, perfect. Yep, everything's flowing over just like we need it to here. Now at this point, it probably makes the most sense to go ahead and build the other side over up just like this one is here. I'm just going to time-lapse through that. You can do it however you want to. You can kind of finish one side completely before moving to the next. But I personally think it makes the most sense to build up each of these sections together at the same time. Alright, so now that our bulk storage is pretty much done, we'll just have to go ahead and start putting honey blocks on top of these hoppers. Now, the reason we're doing this is because the honey block doesn't have a full hitbox, so once we push items up against them, they'll slip into the hoppers. Then we can go ahead and build up some glass on the other side here. The one complication here when we're connecting these sides is that we can't simply do an L shape. For the reasons I mentioned before, we need to have the items bumping against the honey blocks on both of the sides here, and if we just have them flowing down the ice with a water path, they're going to bump up against the right side, which is the opposite of what we want. So the fastest thing I could think of was just to kind of do a little bend, and this will force the items up against the opposite side when it loops back in and makes it to this point. But all we're going to do is just connect all of these honey blocks here, and then put glass on the other side. Just like this. The other connection we'll want to make too is with these hoppers that are going to be carrying our shulker boxes. We're just going to continue this L shape. Just like this. After connecting the sides, we can move back over here and start building up the category sorting section. Now, all we're going to do is go on over to the glass that we've built up from this bulk section down here. We're going to build up 3 blocks, put a half slab, break these 2 blocks, and then we can look down into this redstone to put another block right behind the slab. And then we'll just put a comparator right over the slab. Next, we're just going to want to put a line of redstone over those blocks right behind the comparators. So now that we have the redstone line in place, all we need to do is start placing down slabs to lay down a platform for where we're going to be putting our rails. We're gonna, on this right side here, we're gonna go in 15 blocks, so 15, place down an activator rail there, and then on this side, we're gonna put down an activator rail right after these filters that we have down below. But before we start laying down a lot of rail here, I just want to sort of go through ways to make rails faster. So I have a guide here that's first off going to kind of orient you in this world save, and it's going to give you guidelines for how to place these rails in various orientations. These rails will only work for certain directions, but these two types work for all of the other directions. The other thing I just wanted to call out here is that you can set up these curved rails. For instance, you can do them like this, or you can do them like this. Now, the way you want to be doing this then is to make sure that the curve is coming away from any solid block that is adjacent to the rails. So we're going to go ahead and start with this side first. Like I said, it behooves us to have a couple powered rails at the start of this section and also some in the middle, so we're just going to do this here. And then the rest pretty much is going to be curved rails. We can go ahead and break this rail because we know that it's going to be hard to connect a regular rail to it. So it's going to be, something like this. Then we can go ahead and replace that powered rail without issue. One, two, three. And then I'm going to go ahead and place all of these. And then we're just going to go ahead and continue this pattern until we have this whole area here. We're going to want to put a powered rail on the end here, and then we are just going to need to clear all of this space. With this side of the lower rail finished, we can go ahead and move back to the other side here. So we can go ahead and start laying our rails down headed in this direction. So remember, we're going to start from the far side when we're making this shape. I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3 like that. At this point, we just need to put down powered rails at the end here, having it extend one block over, and then we can go ahead and break all of the rails and all of the extra slabs that we've laid down. One thing I just want to call out though is that on a side like this where we have powered rails, we are going to need to have a redstone block here instead of a glass block or a slab like we have over the other rails. We'll be putting comparators on top of this section here, so it's going to be important that you have the right block here just to save yourself a lot of frustration when you go forward and build the rest. Similarly, we need to figure out how to power these rails over here in the bend section. So what we can do is just replace these slabs. So from doing the other side, we know that we're going to need to carry the signal down from this detector rail and have a row of iron blocks just like this, and carry that redstone signal all the way from the detector rail so that it touches every single one of these blocks. Now, you can probably see just from the distance here, but also if we put a minecart, we can see the power does not travel all the way to the end. Now this is a problem mainly because we are going to be carrying signals out from those blocks with comparators. The solution I thought of just requires us to break that solid block, put a note block there, put a repeater on top of it, and then instead of this comparator, put an observer. And that's all we need to do just to extend this signal all the way down. We are going to be putting iron blocks here at the end of these comparators, and we'll just be doing the same exact thing here with this observer. So just like for the bulk section, for the category sorting section, we are just going to build up a few of these side by side so you can see what it looks like, and then we'll kind of go through quickly and do the whole rest of the section. We're going to start with an upward facing dropper here into a downward facing dropper. So you can kind of set that up however you like. I think it makes sense to kind of have a junk block here so that we can get those droppers facing into each other. And I think it's probably a good idea at this point just to go ahead and put an item in there now. You just have to do it like this. Put a comparator down, running on top of a slab here. Then if we go to the other side, we're going to be putting a glass block here with a comparator running out of it like that. And if you want to at this point, you can also go ahead and put down a double chest. Now these are going to be our category filter chests, and we'll set these up a little bit later. But once you're satisfied you've done everything correctly, we'll just want to flip on over to the back side here and put a solid block coming out of this comparator. Then we'll want to put a glass block or a slab on top of the comparator here. And then continuing this diagonal pattern, just put a target block with one space over the double chest here. Continuing forward, we'll just want to go with 2 hoppers just like this, and then we'll put a slab at that same level as the double chest and a comparator running out of this hopper. And so then at this point, you can go ahead and start considering putting down your double chests in the front here. These are going to be the double chests for your category items. And so we'll just have 4 right here, and then we're going to run hoppers into all of them, of course, and we will just continue this all the way for the rest of the section. Then we're just going to go ahead and place hoppers behind every single one of these double chests. So once we're finished filling out all of the double chests and hoppers in the front, it'll make things a lot easier for connecting the redstone up with it. We're going to start by putting out a solid block from the comparator, and then a slab running out in front of it. Then we'll grab activator rails and put one first on top of this slab, then on top of the hopper, then on top of the solid block. So I'll put down a hopper minecart here before we move on, but we're going to go slab, solid block, and remember we go slab, and we can see that this rail breaks and goes in a perpendicular direction. That's actually exactly what we want. We'll need to do this a little bit differently on the other side, which I'll show you how to do once that's built up, but everything should be fine. When we place a activator rail coming out from the hopper, it will still go in the right direction. And same thing with this one on the block here. But then as your next step, you can just go ahead and start placing down a wall on top of these activator rails. And then we'll go to the other side here and start placing down hopper minecarts. So like I mentioned, we are going to have to set this up a little bit differently when we do it on this side. We're still going to have a block with a slab running out of it. And we are going to put down the activator rails in the same order. The slab, the hopper, and then finally to the block. But look what happens when we do this on the next slice. We're going to put the same blocks down again, and we will have the same sequence for the activator rail. But we can see that the activator rail didn't snap to the slab here like it did on this side. The only real difference here is that you're going to finish doing all of these slices here first, and then you're going to add one extra slab onto the end, and then you will put down an activator rail and then just break and replace all of these activator rails so that they go in the right direction. So I am going to need to go back here and actually fix 2 things. I'm going to have to break these blocks here, break the comparators, and you can see the issue here is that we have rails here that aren't being powered, and we can't put those redstone blocks there instead of the slabs because they will power the redstone for the filters underneath. So we need to have the redstone block here and right here, and that will power those rails without issue. Just need to go ahead and then replace the comparators, and then put the glass blocks here. Now with most of the stuff in place here, we can go ahead to the back side and start filling out redstone here. Once all the redstone has been placed, we can go ahead and build this rail up from the bottom here. So we're going to go up 2, over 1, put one more redstone block there, and then connect everything here with powered rails wherever we can. Obviously we have to take the turn with a regular rail and build it up just like this. We can go ahead on over to this side and start building backwards on the rail. Then once we're done, we can go ahead, of course, and break all of these rails. And go ahead and put some redstone torches on each one of these target blocks. We're actually going to need to put down glass blocks here if we have any powered rails, and make sure that they're getting powered just like this. Okay, and so once we are done setting up the rails and all of the torches here, we can drop on down and start setting up the category filter chests. So you can go ahead, and I'll just do this with 2 of these here, but you can see we have 2 non-stackables, and then we have these upper filters, 64 of them here. We put 5 more here, and then fill all of this out. But the quick rule here, I can demonstrate on this chest. is for a 64 stackable item, for one of those items, we need to take out one of the upper filters. But for a stack of 16 item, like a snowball or an iron bucket or sign, we take out 4 of the upper filters, and that's it. So I can just show you how that works. We can take that one out here. And so if we wanted to put in a snowball, we would need to take out 1 of these upper filters and then 3 more, so that we've taken out 4 in total. And then just to prove our point here, we can put in a sign. We've taken out 1, and then we need to take out 3 more. So we've put in 2 16 stackable items here. We need to have 8 taken out from there. And then we've taken 1 other out for this ice right here. So if we've done this right, then that means we should be able to take out one of these 3 items here, a 16 stackable or a 64 stackable. It should turn the torch on, just like we see right here. And then when we put it back, it should turn off. And that should be the case with all of these. One other thing that I just want to call out here is that in a lot of the systems, I think MyZuma does this in the original system as well, is putting item frames here just to help guide you as to what category is when you're making adjustments back here. So, you know, we would put a book here, potentially have another item frame up against this hopper that has snowball or ice, something like that. Alright, so once you've configured the filter chests, all we need to do is just connect the top section here. We're going to start by laying down some rails with a detector rail first, and then we're going to use this same curved rail pattern. So we're just going to place down some extra slabs here and do a powered rail with 2 regular rails just like this, and repeat the pattern 1 more time, and then put another powered rail right here. So we're going to add some power sources now and take a look at what happens with this regular curved rail once we place down a torch. It's going to update it and curve it in the opposite direction, which obviously we don't want. And the same thing is going to happen here too. Place down all of your power sources first, and then we'll have to break this rail section and just repeat it 1 more time. Then we are just going to curve a regular rail into 2 more powered rails. Then we will just continue this curved pattern, because if we hit F3, we can see that this is facing south. So that will allow us to use the fastest curved rail pattern. Once we get to the end, we're just going to place down 2 slabs and put down powered rails there. So then we'll curve this last section in, and then we can just go back down and break all of these extra curved rails. And then put down some redstone torches just like we have on the other side. One other thing that I want to do before we move on to the Allay section over there is build out a shortcut. Now this is something in one of MyZuma's later videos that I think works equally well for this system. So we're going to start by building out from this corner here. 1 slab out. Use a junk block, and we're just going to sort of staircase up a little bit here. 2 blocks here just like this. Redstone block here. Another junk block. And 1 more slab just like this. So we should be able to put 2 regular rails here, and then connect upwards and downwards with these powered rails. And so next we are just going to place some solid blocks over every single one of the torches on this side. And then run a redstone line over the whole thing. We want to be able to carry a signal from this whole line no matter where it comes from. So we know this whole thing is 25 wide here. If we were to activate this torch on the end, we can do that just by breaking this redstone here. We can see that we would have to carry a signal out right here. And we know it'll definitely work from this side because that's less than 15. We just need to put down a slab with a repeater coming out of this block. Go ahead and replace this. And so we are going to put a solid block here and carry a bunch of slabs out from here to the very end. We're going to put a solid block here so that we can drop the signal. We're going to go down 1, go down 1 more in this direction, and then we are just going to staircase down the rest of the way just like this and put down slabs. So we're going to carry the signal of redstone out, put a repeater right here, Then take the redstone all the way down, and then put a repeater here, pointed into a solid block. So let's take a look and see how this actually works. We can go into any single one of the chests on the side and take an item out. So if we take out this quartz ore here, we can see already that a signal has now come down from this torch originally. And we can see now that this rail has curved because of the signal going into the block next to it. And it's going to keep the minecart from taking this entire section to the right here, and instead will go right back over the top and basically cut the travel time in half. The next part we'll be building up is the minecart loader and the allay chamber. So we'll start by dropping down and building one block out just like this. Put an upward facing dropper to the left of the path and put a hopper facing into it. 2 slabs like this, a redstone block, and then 3 slabs running down just like this. We're just going to put powered rails for these 3 here, an activator rail on top of the slab, a powered rail behind it, 2 more rails bending down like this, and then 1 more powered rail at the end with a target block attached just like this. Flipping on over to the other side of this rail here, we're just going to build out with a slab, a redstone block, drop down 1, put down another slab here, put a dropper to the right of this path that's facing up, and put a hopper into it. 2 more slabs running out of that hopper, redstone block, 3 more slabs here, and then a solid block right here. And so we are going to want to put down 2 powered rails, a detector rail right here like this, 2 more powered rails with a block of redstone just like this, unpowered rails on the corner, and then powered rails everywhere else. And then we're just going to need a quick power source for this iron block right here, and this should do the trick. Then at the very end of this rail here, we're going to want to have a dispenser, 2 hopper minecarts in there just like that. Put a solid block right here with redstone on top of it. As our next step, we're just going to take a hopper and point it towards this rail right here. And we are going to put a blocker item in this top hopper just like this. The way this is going to work is a hopper minecart is going to get dispensed from here. It's going to pick up the blocker item. There's going to be a hopper here that drops down 4 non-stackable blocker items. And then once the cart comes back through here, it's going to drop off the blocker item, and we are going to need something to push it back up into this hopper for the next cycle. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. We're going to start by putting down a no block right here, 2 blocks away from this dropper, an observer, and a block of iron here. Put a comparator here on top of the observer, and then a solid block right there. So just to test if it works, we should be able to take the blocker item, put it in here, and have it get sent right back up here. Okay, so next we're just going to build a staircase up from this detector rail, have it go up 3 blocks and wrap around this corner like this. Then we're going to have it go up 1 more block, and we're going to make this little shape here, and put an iron block right here. Next, we're going to run redstone all the way up the slabs and around the corner like this, and then we're also going to run it here with a comparator pointing into the iron block here, another one pointing in the opposite direction, redstone here, and then a torch right here. We're going to be putting an iron block here at the end of this redstone line, have a dropper coming out of it, another one facing it in the opposite direction right into it like that. Place an item inside. It can be any item. Have a slab coming out from under this left one right here with a comparator running into a sticky piston with a solid block attached to it. We are going to build out a falling edge monostable circuit here with a slab with redstone on it, upward facing sticky piston with a block attached, slab coming out with a repeater set to 4 ticks. Attach a solid block to the end of that, put a 1 block gap with another solid block below that, and then put a slab between, and then just run redstone all along the back. Last but not least, we're going to go ahead and put our input chest right here up against this piston. Then we are going to run a slab out of the double chest right here, put a comparator on it, have a solid block coming out of that with redstone on it, and then point that into a target block. Then we're going to take a right turn here and pull a comparator out from this target block. We'll put a solid block here with redstone on it, and then we are going to build down one more block with a slab and put down a comparator right there. Then we'll move on down to this detector rail, put a solid block running out of it just like this with a comparator on it, and then that's going to be attached to another solid block right here, so we've got these two blocks right on top of each other. And then we're just going to make a little platform here with slabs around this iron block. And then on the back side next to the redstone block, we will be putting a cake with 2 redstone dust right there, and then have a comparator in subtract mode. We're going to put 4 more upward facing droppers on top of this one. Then we will go back down to the bottom and run an observer out of that dropper, point it into a note block, and then we will alternate between observers and note blocks until we get to the very top, just like this. Then we will go back down and run observers out of the note blocks, pointed back into these droppers. Then we are going to just put 2 hoppers facing the rail just like that. And we can make this silent if we just put a slab on top of the note block right there. Now we are going to focus a little bit more on the item intake here in this double chest. The first thing we're going to have to do is break this redstone here. We have some items that might be falling into the double chest, and we don't necessarily want the system to fire off. We're going to start by putting down 4 hoppers into this chest. And then we are going to layer in 4 more, just like this, so that we have this 2x3 grid here. So we're going to start by placing a C shape here around these 5 hoppers. We're going to put down an activator rail. We're going to put down a hopper minecart here. Push it off to one side. Put down another one right here. And then we're going to go ahead and put down 2 more onto the rail, just like this. And we want them to kind of spread 2 here and 2 here. Next thing we're going to do is go ahead and break that rail. We're going to take an iron bar and put it right next to these hopper minecarts. We're going to get a regular piston, put it up against that observer so it's up like that against the iron bar. We're going to power the piston, break the iron bar, build up so that there's a glass block over it, build up a couple junk blocks so we can put a piston here. And then we are going to power this piston so that it pushes the glass block down into that section right here with these hopper minecarts. Then we can break this stuff. We're just going to go ahead and make this a lot simpler by putting down an activator rail, surrounding it in glass like this, and just putting down a hopper minecart on that activator rail. And that's all that's really required here. So we can just go ahead and take ice into this hopper minecart, because that's going to be where our items feed in directly, and just build up around this. We are going to need to replace this slab with a glass block now that I think about it, and then we will need to go down here and just build out our item elevator. So soul sand here, trapdoor, honey blocks all the way up on this side, and then glass to make a tube everywhere else. Now ultimately we'll be capping off this block here to keep the items from flying up, but since we're not putting water in right now, we don't need to worry about it. One last thing to finish off with the cart loader here is to set up some of these hoppers. Put a barrel, another hopper coming into it just like this, 1 more hopper going down. At the other end of this rail, we're going to go ahead and put 2 hoppers, a barrel, a hopper running into it just like this, another barrel on top of it, 2 more hoppers, 1 more coming out, and then 1 more hopper running down into it just like that. Then we're going to go ahead and put our blue ice or packed ice right here. Alright, and so before we move on to the next section, just make sure we go back to this double chest right here. Make sure this double chest is empty, and then we can go ahead and replace that redstone. At this point, we can also go ahead and begin to fill up this barrel here on the right side with the blocker item that we want the allays to be picking up, and we want to be filling out the hopper minecart. I'm going to be using stone shovels. You can use pretty much any non-stackable that you want, but the important thing is that they're all the same. Moving on to this hopper up here, this is going to be the center of our allay chamber, so we're going to want to start by putting down a redstone block temporarily, just like this. Put down a solid block on this side, And then we're just going to want to surround the area in solid blocks and then put a piston on the opposite side of the redstone block, just like this. The way this works is we are going to set our allay to pick up a particular item. We're going to throw it into the bottom of this hopper. And then once it goes down to try and grab the item to hand back to us, we're going to close the slab over, break the sticky piston, and hopefully it traps our allay inside. Alright, so now that we have our allay in the area, we're going to go ahead and give it our blocker item. We're going to put a lead on it. And then once it gets close enough to this hopper, we're going to go ahead and throw our blocker item inside. When the allay goes in, we're going to flip that lever. We're going to use this lead to try and drag the allay into the middle part of the hopper so that it gets stuck. If it's sitting up on the edge, it will slide right out as soon as we break the piston. Once you're reasonably sure that you've dragged the allay into the middle part of the hopper, you can go ahead and break this piston. And if you've done everything right, the allay should be sitting inside of this hopper and not on one of the edges on the outside here. Don't worry, if the allay slides out, you can always just replace the slab, replace the piston, and try all over again. Once you've successfully gotten the allay into the hopper though, you can go ahead and remove the lead. And if it's thrown the item back to you, or if the lead has broken inside of the hopper, make sure you grab those before you break this redstone block. But once you've done that, you can go ahead and break everything here, except the slab, of course. Now that the allay's inside the hopper, we're going to start by building out this path a little bit more with blue or packed ice. And then we're going to start duplicating allays. So we're going to throw down a jukebox, put a record in it, and get an amethyst shard out so that we can duplicate the allay. Make sure for each one of these new allays that you are assigning the same exact blocker item. So we're only going to need somewhere between 5 and 6 allays in total, but there's a 2-minute cooldown, so while we're waiting for that, we are just going to go ahead and build out this platform a little bit more. We're going to start by putting down a bit more blue ice here. And then we're going to sort of build up this 2-high wall all around the allay chamber. We're going to put down a sign that's 1 across from the hopper right here and 1 past it. And the only other non-glass block that we're going to use here is this iron block right next to the slab. And then we can go ahead and break this jukebox for now, and then put glass everywhere else. The one other thing that you're going to want to do here is put down a glass block right here. It's going to keep the items from getting stuck on this hopper. Once we have between 5 and 6 allays, we can go ahead and break the jukebox. Then we're just going to go around to the back side, put down a note block on top of the hopper, a solid block next to it, and then we're just going to run redstone up, just like this. Returning back to this side, we're just going to make Ilmango's instant cart breaker. So we're going to start by putting a solid block right here, another one next to it, an amethyst cluster coming out of it, and then we're just going to surround it in glass like this. Then we're going to go down to this ice right here and put down a powered rail, put a cauldron on top of the hopper, and then put lava inside of the cauldron. Then we're going to put down a mud block on top of the cauldron, just like this. And then we're just going to run slabs down to complete this path like we have right here. Then we're going to put down a detector rail, followed by a normal rail, and then followed by 2 more powered rails up into this mud block. We're going to put a power source right on this glass block right here with this lever. And we can go ahead and also just grab a redstone block and put it on top of the rails just like this. And then lastly, we are just going to staircase up so that we can carry the redstone signal from that detector rail. And then just to finish out this section, we are going to shift click a bucket of water into that powered rail. And so then at this point, all we have to do is just extend the ice path. And then we're going to want to build up some glass on the sides. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put down some of our double chests here for the overflow storage. Then we're just going to drop down and put down a hopper behind every single one of the double chests. Then we are going to put another row of hoppers pointing in this direction at the end, except for this last one, which can point downward. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and build up, because this is ultimately where our item overflow will be coming in from the category sorting path. So we're just going to extend this over. And then we're just going to build this out. And put a trapdoor right here. And at this point, if you want, you can also go ahead and start wrapping the ice path back around and connecting it to the far right side over here. And of course, you'll just want to then build a glass wall around all of it as well. So we can go ahead and start placing water down here over these ice paths. And so then we're just going to go ahead and start placing water sources here. And now we're going to add a slab to keep the items from flying up too high here. And then we can just jump across over to here and start placing down our water sources. Before we can run this system, we just need to finish one more part with the minecart loading section over here. Now this is just a dropper-based RS latch where we have a bottle in one dropper and we're kind of putting signals on either sides of these droppers to pass the item back and forth. If we look here, we can see that this detector rail is what sends a signal through here and pushes the bottle into this side, deactivating the piston and preventing us from launching another minecart. That's sort of the fail-safe mechanism. And so what we'll need is a signal on this side to activate the dropper and allow the piston to extend for the next item sorting cycle to go through. In the original version of the system, we would just carry the signal down from the note block onto the dropper, and that would sort of reset the cycle. But in the 2.0 version of the system, we actually can send the signal way earlier than at this detector rail right here. If we're taking the full lap around the system, we can send the signal as early as here, and if we're taking the shortcut, so just the half version of the system, we can send the signal here. Now we'll just be wanting to run a signal into this dropper from those detector rails over there. So we're going to go ahead and put a solid block here, 2 slabs, and then we're just going to staircase up until we get to this glass level right here. Then we'll run redstone all the way along up to the top just like this. Next we will run a line of slabs all the way down. Then we will want to sort of connect up this detector rail right here in this L shape of slabs. And so now we're going to work our way backwards to get down to this detector rail here. We want them both to be sending up through the same channel. So we will be putting a slab here. Another one here just like this. And then we'll be building out 3 more with a slab to the left off of this second one. And here we are going to be putting a target block with a torch on it. Then we'll be taking our repeaters, take one, and put it out from that torch just like this. And then we will take another repeater and put it perpendicular to this one. Now we just need to finish this circuit here. We can go ahead and put a junk block here and another slab, which should allow us to just connect this all the way through. And then we can go ahead and break those junk blocks. And then we'll connect all of this redstone here. And it doesn't really matter where you put the repeaters here, just make sure you have enough to cover the distance. So once we finish that 2.0 reset line, we can pretty much say that we are officially done with all of the sorting and storage bits in this machine. just to confirm that, we can go ahead and put some items in here. And it should work. Alright, so we are going to go just to the left of these overflow chests, and we are going to put down a 6x7 block again of double chests. So 6 long, and then we're going to go and build this up 7 blocks. Then we're going to move on to the back side and put down hoppers going into all of these double chests. So now we're going to go ahead and build our item input. That's going to be a double trap chest. And we're going to do that by building over 3 blocks to the left. Put your double chest so that it's in line with the back block here on these double chests and elevated by 1. Now we're going to go ahead and build out our shulker filters. It's going to start by putting down a downward facing hopper with 2 hoppers pointing into it. And we're going to do that on both sides here. Next, we're going to dig down 1 below these hoppers. We're going to go out 4 blocks off to the sides in each direction, and then we are going to dig back 5 or 6 blocks. Underneath those downward pointed hoppers in the back, we're going to go ahead and put 2 droppers facing forward, and then at the front of those, we'll be putting down a shulker on each side. And this is basically just one shulker filter mirrored, so I'm going to go ahead and build out one side first, and then we'll just mirror that on the other side. We will start with a solid block here with a comparator on it. Point that into a solid block here, run another solid block out, and then put another solid block up 1 just like this. Put redstone here, and then 2 slabs like this with a repeater coming out first, and then redstone going into this comparator. Moving over to this side, just drop this section here by 1 block here, so clear this out. We can put a chest here with a hopper going into it, coming out of this dropper. We'll want to put a slab right here with a repeater set to 2 ticks. And then we're just going to want to knock this block out here and then put redstone right here like that. So then we're just going to flip around and do all of that on this side right here. Before I forget, let's go ahead and put down a couple hoppers here coming out of these shulkers. And so now we're free to go ahead and test this out. So if we did this right, we should be able to put some shulkers in here and a few stackable items. Now we should be seeing these shulkers in the double chest in the back, and then this target block and note block should be in the hoppers right below the shulkers that we see in front of us. So if we check these hoppers here, we see the stackable items, perfect. And then the shulkers have been separated. Now that we finished our shulker filter, we can go ahead and move on to the shulker unloader. So we're going to go ahead and dig down 6 blocks below this. And we're just going to go ahead and clear this whole area out. We are just going to be placing a chest underneath this right hopper here and make that a double chest. Flip back to the other side and have a line of 3 hoppers going into it, just like this. And then 1 on the other side here. And then we will put in a 3rd hopper line. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and make the base of the shulker unloader right here over these 6 hoppers. So we are going to start by making a C shape. Put a rail over this hopper like that. minecart with a hopper on the rail, put a second one here, then we'll be putting down a third, and then a fourth. And they should split off by 2 and 2, just like this. Next, we are just going to want to break this rail here, put down an iron bar right here, piston here, and then we are going to push the iron bar, then we'll just break the piston. These iron bars don't need to be attached to any walls, we can go ahead and break those. But for our next step, we are going to go ahead and place glass over this iron bar section right here. We are going to break the iron bars, and then we will be pushing this glass block down with a piston. Break the piston, and then we will be putting down an activator rail here, a sticky piston off to this left side, and then one iron bar on the right corner like this. Now for the next section, we're going to need to work on the other side a little bit, so we're going to clear a little bit of extra space. We are going to be putting a block here that has a repeater on it set to 2 ticks. And then we are going to be putting down a block right here with a torch. Now we can go back and start placing more of our hopper minecarts. We are going to push one off to this iron bar right here. And now we are just going to go up and build up 2 iron bars here. Put a block above that hopper minecart, an activator rail, stand on this block and push a hopper minecart up against the iron rail, break the block. Then we are going to place another iron block right here, activator rail. Now we're going to get off the block, place a hopper minecart, and break the block again. Next, we will just be breaking these 2 iron bars. Make sure you leave this third one. Put an observer attached to that sticky piston, going into a solid block. And then next to this repeater, we're going to put down a solid block with a comparator pointed into this one. Alright, so next we'll be putting a regular piston over this iron block here, any transparent block right next to it, solid block next to that, and then glass again right here. Then we'll be taking a redstone comparator and put it in subtract mode. We'll be taking a solid block right here, put redstone on the other side, into another solid block just like this. Have another one running out of it with a repeater set to 3 ticks, and have redstone going into this comparator. Then we'll want to flip to the other side and put an observer on top of the torch just like this, another observer coming out of it, redstone just like this, target block here, and then we will want to put a dispenser right next to that target block. Once we're done with that, we can go ahead and connect this double chest to this dispenser right here like this. And all we'll have to do is run some hoppers out in this direction. This is where our empty shulker is going to be. But remember, we also want to have double hopper speed for any items that we input directly into this double chest. Start by putting 2 hoppers directly over this chest, barrel on the right side, hopper pointing into it, hopper right on top of that, another hopper right there, with another hopper pointed into it from the left, and then we're just going to put down 2 barrels right here. Beneath this, we are going to be putting our non-stackable item filters. The first thing we're going to need to do is dig out some space here. And we're going to want to dig 3 blocks below this double chest. Alright, ultimately, we're going to want the contents of this double chest to head in this direction, so we'll start by putting 2 hoppers pointed in that direction underneath, and then underneath those, we're going to be putting 2 downward-facing hoppers, and we're going to be essentially making 2 non-stackable item filters side by side. We'll just start that by making the first one here, with a solid block off to the right here, and a comparator on top. 2 solid blocks out like this, and then 1 below underneath that one. And then we'll be putting slabs on either side of this solid block. So then we'll be putting redstone out here like this, torch coming out of that block there, redstone there, and then a repeater pointed into this solid block. For the other non-stackable item filter, I just wanted to tuck the design underneath these hoppers here. So we're going to start by putting down a block right here next to that downward facing hopper, run a slab out of it just like this, 2 more slabs coming out here, a solid block there, and then we will be putting a repeater here, redstone torch here, redstone all the way down like this, and then a comparator pointed outward into these slabs just like that. Once we're done with those non-stackable filters, we can flip on over to the other side, run 3 hoppers in this direction, ultimately pointed into a dropper, and we just want this dropper to spit out the non-stackables as soon as they're inside, so we will be falling back on an old design here, run a comparator out into a sticky piston, have an observer pointed in this direction attached to that, and then we will be putting another observer. Alright, and so we're going to be connecting these 2 hoppers here to the item batcher. It's going to be located in this direction, but we're going to need to dig out a bit of space first. Okay, so we are going to start by building out from these hoppers here. We're going to go out 2 blocks like this, and then 2 more just like this, and then we will be putting down a dropper. We'll be putting a hopper pointed down into it, and then we'll be making this L shape here from this far right hopper, and then the last one will just be going right into this one right here. And then last but not least, you're going to want to put a hopper going down from this side into the dropper as well. Alright, so we're going to start by putting a solid block right here next to the dropper, 2 blocked at this hopper level on the back side like that, 2 droppers facing into each other with a 1 block gap from the solid blocks here. And then in that gap, we'll be placing 2 observers. On top of the iron blocks, we'll be placing 2 note blocks. Out from those, 2 observers. And then we're going to go down to these droppers right here, put down some slabs, run comparators out of them, 2 solid blocks like this, torches running out of them. On top of those torches, 2 more solid blocks. Then we're going to put down 2 more droppers facing into each other on top of those. 2 slabs running out of those. And then we'll be placing comparators on top of those slabs. 2 solid blocks coming out of them. And 2 more redstone torches. Next, we're going to be placing a note block right here on top of this observer. Run another observer coming out of it into another note block. And then we're going to make this turn here and put down 2 observers into a solid block just like this. Attach a piston facing in that same direction, and then below that, a piston facing in the opposite direction, and attached to the side of it, a downward facing observer. We will just be attaching a solid block here, note block, observer, and then we're going to have a 1 block gap with redstone on it like that. From this solid block, a repeater set to 2 ticks. Coming out from that redstone, a sticky piston facing this way, and then attached to that repeater, a regular piston facing up. From this solid block, we'll be placing 2 more just like this. Then to the right of the dropper, we're going to have an observer pointed outward like that. Another observer pointed downward. And then from there, a regular piston pointed to the left like that. Then off this top note block, we will be placing a downward facing piston. From here, we are just going to be adding our iron trap doors, and we're going to be starting at this level. We'll be placing 3 across the top and make sure that they're just at the very bottom of this block here. And then we will be placing 2 more on both sides of these solid blocks here. And we are just going to do that until we get down to this 4th level here. Then we're just going to flip on down to the bottom side, and at this iron trap door, place an observer. Place a note block up here behind the dropper, and then we're going to run 1 block out with a 1 block gap like that, and then 1 more coming directly out of the observer. Put a repeater on it, set to 3 ticks of delay. From below this block, we'll be placing a 2 block gap, and then finally our blue or packed ice below just like this. Then we're going to get on the other side of the block, and look at the bottom left corner of the ice and place down an iron door. The knob should be on this left side here. Alright, so before we kick this off to run, we are next just going to incorporate our off switch. So we're going to have 2 slabs running out of this bottom note block here with a target block on the end, attach a redstone torch on top, redstone here, and then a repeater just like this. Now, as long as there's a powered signal going into this block, this machine will be off. Alright, so all that's left to do here is just configure these pairs of droppers. On the lower one, we'll be putting 18 items inside, and on this upper one, we'll just be placing 1 item. One other important thing before I forget, you're just going to want to place redstone on that solid block right next to the dropper there. Now we can go ahead and load some items inside and break this. We should see the items getting dispensed. Now, as you can see, obviously this is a problem. We are going to want to block this section off. You can just put 2 glass blocks right there like that, and that'll keep any items from going into this hopper. Okay, so we can go ahead and replace this redstone to lock the machine up again. And next what we'll be doing is configuring the on-off switch for the batcher. That is just going to start with a slab running out of that bottom hopper here. Put a comparator on top. And then we will be running 10 slabs out in this direction. Then we'll be placing a solid block right here. And then we'll just continue this whole section and fill this out with slabs like that. Put a solid block right here, a repeater here, redstone here, 2 more pieces of redstone, and then we are just going to run a line of comparators into this block, redstone here, and then comparators running all the way back into this line here. So with the batcher now done, we can go ahead and fill out some of the ice paths here. You'll want to put glass up around this area. And then you'll want to put a water source here. And then you can also put another one here. So the last thing we might want to do here is just check and make sure that the batcher is putting out groups of no more than 22. For that, we just need to go right back up to the top and throw in a bunch of any item. So we can just stand here, wait for the next one. Alright, so 22. Perfect. 22 more. Next, we're just going to hop down here, and we are going to hit F3 to get our coordinates, and we're going to be looking at the first 2 numbers, so the X and the Y. So we see here that 13 is our X and negative 59 is our Y. Now we're going to use those numbers as a reference point when we're working backwards from the ice path near the bulk item filters. So I want to leave a little bit of extra room here for reasons that I will mention in a bit. Build out 3 extra blocks here and extend the ice path out that way as well. And then this will also be just 2 more blocks over here. And then this is ultimately where the tunnel or the bubble elevator will be coming up from. So we're going to need to continue this tube downwards so we can just get inside of it and replace any glass here. Now this is the part where your coordinates are going to matter. We are going to want to dig down to negative 59. And then we will want to dig forward until we get to x equals 13. And if we dig this way, we should be meeting up with the ice path once we dig far enough. Perfect. Okay, so now that we've connected the path, we are going to go ahead and replace this dirt with packed or blue ice, and we are just going to go all the way down the tunnel. Then we will just be placing our water sources all the way back. So we will need to be putting a trapdoor here, and then instead of dirt or anything else, we'll be putting down soul sand. And that is of course going to be the basis of our bubble elevator. Now we're going to go ahead and place a block here, and then water sources all the way up top. And if we've done it properly, we should meet back up with this ice path here. We can go ahead and place down our final water source, and then cap this off with any block that you choose. Before we can move on though, we need to go back and just finish up our shulker unloader. Okay, and we are going to go ahead and take the opportunity to deal with the shulker boxes once they've been unloaded and travel down this hopper chain. So we're going to obviously have this third hopper going into it so it leads down into the dropper. And then we are going to make just a super simple dropper clock but we are going to just right off the bat put down our bubble elevator right here. And that'll of course start with a glass tube here. And we are just going to go all the way up above ground here. And then we're basically just going to build this up until we get to this hopper level here. Okay, and so for this part, we're just going to put honey blocks over these hoppers, just like we did for the bulk item filters, and then put our blue ice right in front of it like that. The idea here is we're going to want to give priority to filling up these chests, because this is where you're going to want to pick up your shulker boxes when you go off onto an expedition. So we are just going to match the honey blocks on the other side here with glass. And then we are going to go out one block and then in one more. Then we're going to go ahead and drop down 3 blocks just like this. This is where the path here will drop down. Well, all we need to do is build this little glass tube down and just make sure we leave an opening in the direction of the cart loader. And so we will want to connect this ice path here with this hopper right here, because this is what's going to feed into all of these shulker films. So we are just going to be putting down a barrel and a hopper, but then we are just going to connect this with the tube we made. And obviously we'll just want to build glass up around all of this. And let's just go ahead back to the very start here and start placing all of our water sources from the very beginning. You'll just need to go ahead and block this section off here so no items go flying out from the top there. So now we're going to go back down and we are going to rig the non-stackable item filters. We want the items that get dispensed from there to go into the overflow chests. So I think the easiest way to do this again is just to hit F3, figure out what our coordinates are. The only thing you're going to need to keep track of here is your Y level. So we can see it's 57 here. And all we'll have to do is go to this back hopper right here, hit F3 again, and we are going to dig down to that same Y level, so negative 57. And then we're just going to dig in this direction because we know this is sort of where all of the item input is. There's just this bend that we have to deal with, but otherwise we can get directly into that overflow chest. Okay, and so you can bring this ice path out however you like. Just make sure you're connecting with the hole you just dug. You can probably just put one more block here to be safe. And then we are going to be putting down our soul sand at the end, just like this. And we are just going to fill out our water sources going all the way up. And then we are just going to be building up a glass tube that goes up behind these hoppers and comes in over the top. Let me just show you which parts you need to have closed off. It's just all of this stuff here. And actually, this doesn't need to be quite that high. We can knock out one level. And so this is just going to, come up from here and go right into this hopper, just as our overflow from the multi-item sorting is going to be going in here. So they'll both wind up in the same place. So with that final connection, we are pretty much done with the main system. We can take a full look here and we can see everything is connected. We've got all of the item intake figured out, the shulker filtering, non-stackable item filtering, item batching, going over to bulk sorting first. Then we know that goes to multi-item and then the overflow after that. So at this point, the only functional thing that we need to build still is the chunk loader. Once we're done with that, it's basically just going to be a couple of quality of life upgrades and a few things to make the system more robust. But once we're past that point, all you'll need to do really is just start adding your item frames and decorate the room. In this version, I'm actually going to build it below the floor here. If you're curious about how high you might want to have it, you could use those as an example over there, but all you really need to do is just make sure your chunk loader stays within this chunk here. So I'm going to hit F3 because we'll need to connect some of the parts below to it. And I'm probably going to go down to roughly the same Y level as the item batcher and all the stuff going on over there. So probably Y equals -57 or so. We will start by putting down a portal frame, just like this. Then we are going to dig through onto the other side, dig underneath, and then put a hopper facing forward into this dirt block here like this. Then we are going to have that leading into a dispenser that's pointed upwards. Next, you're going to want to dig out a couple blocks here. And then we will be putting a solid block right here, detector rail, and then another detector rail running up like this. Break this one, put a slab down on top of this other one, and then grab a torch and attach it to that solid block just like this. Next, we will grab a hopper minecart and place it on this rail right here. Now, if we've done it properly, it should slide right through the obsidian and be inside of it just like that. Next, you will just want to light the portal and go on through it. And so then on this nether side, we will just light a fire on both sides and then cover the entire area with glass. And then we'll head back through. So then as a final step, go ahead and place a few minecarts in this dispenser, and then we should be able to just go ahead and break and then replace this torch, and it should just kick the whole chunk loader into motion. Okay, and so now that the chunk loader is built, we need to connect it with some parts of the system that will tell it when to be running and when to shut off. So we are going to need to dig on through to the item batcher. So one other thing I also wanted to call out here is the pulse extender here. We're going to make something similar onto this side just because we want to make sure that the system is fully running anytime an item leaves this item batcher and is going through the system somewhere. So our pulse extender is going to be situated right here. So it should be, I think, 11 long here. And so at this point, we are just going to lay down our pulse extender starting here with 2 redstone. Then a line of comparators running in this direction. Put a solid block here, redstone on the other side, and then another line of comparators running all the way back to the original redstone here. Then we will be going back on over to this side, placing down a redstone torch just like this, and then 1 piece of redstone running into this dispenser. And we should see now at this point that the chunk loader has stopped, and that's exactly what we want. So when there's not a signal going through here, there's no need to have the chunk loader activated. So we will have it deactivated for that period, and then anytime this is receiving a signal, this will be allowed to run basically by this torch turning off. So at this point, we just need to connect this piece of redstone on over with this part of the pulse extender from the batcher. We can do that pretty easily by just putting a solid block there, repeater coming out of it, just like this. However you want, pretty much, just get a redstone signal going into here. Ideally, that'll be happening at 15 signal strength, so we can go ahead and just put a repeater right here to guarantee that. And so now the chunk loader, at least for the batcher, is all set up. Alright, so now that we've connected the item batcher with the chunk loader, we need to do that for the multi-item sorter, and all we'll be doing there is checking for any time an item is entered into this chest. Alright, so at this point we will be pulling a signal out of this block that's pulling from this comparator by putting a repeater right here. And again, this is another thing where you can kind of just use your own judgment here. We're just going to try and, as efficiently as possible, go all the way underground back to, I think, y equals -57, and we are going to be trying to connect up with this pulse extender right here. Now, I think all you really need to do is just get in the general area. You don't necessarily need to be looking through walls to get this right. I think, just sort of dig into this area until you're close, and then work your way towards the pulse extender. And then we are just going to sort of staircase our way down using solid blocks. $11, $12, $13, $14, $15. So we need to go ahead and put a slab here. And we'll be doing the same thing where we just want to carry a signal of 15 with a repeater right here. And I think this spacing works out just perfectly. So there should be 15, 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this signal ought to carry through. Okay, I think probably the first thing to call out here is that for any item that groups in stacks of 16 like ender pearls here, you are going to need a special setup to bulk store them. So the core issue is the capacity of the filters and how much is coming in the batches. If you only are planning on bulk storing a couple of the 16 stackable items, so like I would say no more than 3, you can basically just add a bunch of extra filters here and have them feed into the end shulker box. Now I said 3 because you could fit one on this end here, and there's a bit of extra space on the end here. So we're gonna go ahead and build out 3 slices. So we'll start with this right here, and then we'll just build everything else up around it. And so once you kind of have these back parts of the filter set up, I think it makes sense to figure out also what we're going to be doing with the inputs from those filters. So I think you could probably put a line of barrels here instead and have everything just feed directly into the shulker. But I think if we're really worried about overflow happening at 2 times hopper speed, I think this is really the most robust way to deal with that. And so you're just going to go ahead and put down all of your hoppers like normally at this point. So then, yeah, we'll have these going down into here. And then we are going to go ahead and just set these filters up. And now we should be good. For the next upgrade, we're going to have to talk about the robustness of our item input system right over here. We have designed it to handle a lot of different item types. The one exception to that case is if we put in those upper filter sticks into the system. If those sticks make it up here, the first thing that they'll probably be doing is breaking the bulk filters, starting with this one and working all the way down until all of those are broken. And in the very worst case scenario, they make it up to the category filtering system, and then everything just starts breaking down completely. So all we really have to do here is just make another filter in front of all of these bulk item sorters here, and we are going to filter for the upper filter item. It's going to be just like this mechanism so that it works at 2 times hopper speed. But instead of having a shulker here, we are going to have a cauldron with lava inside of it. So we're just going to be destroying those filter items before they can get anywhere near the system and break anything. So to start off, we're going to build this filter up over here on this side. Okay, and so now we are basically just going to copy all of this stuff. We are going to have a downward facing dropper, of course, going into the lava cauldron. And then we will have a solid block here. We don't need to have a solid block here, we can just have a slab since we're not looking to push a signal through onto the other side here. We'll have a comparator there into a solid block, and then a torch coming out of it, and then we'll be putting down these observers here. We're just going to put this one down first, and then put a note block behind it. Then we will put down this other observer on the other side, put down our solid block, then we'll just come back, place our observer, and then a solid block right there. All that's left at that point is just to put all of the hoppers in place. We are going to make a special filter item, so only rename 4 of these items with some random selection of characters like this, so that you could never possibly make it again. And then we are going to set the filters up by having the stack of upper filters here, and then, you know, those 4 blocker items. This shouldn't matter because nothing theoretically other than these upper filters should ever be getting down here. And so we are going to put those custom items that we just named as our blocker items here. Then we're just going to grab a stack, we can put it in here, and we should be able to see this thing working right away. Perfect. Okay, so from the feedback I got from those of you who tried to build this system early, I think the most common thing I heard was that when you log off while this system is running, when you log back in, you would sometimes find that the hopper minecart is stuck underneath the loading chest, and it really doesn't have a way to get going again. So we're going to have a quick access button that's from this chest, and basically anytime you're putting in category sortable items into here and you notice that they're not making their way to the chests or that you see the system isn't running, you can just go ahead and press the button and rest assured everything will get going again. So we will just start by working our way backwards. So we will start by working our way back from 15 just to make sure that the signal is long enough. A repeater here. Okay, so before we go any further though, the one thing I want to make sure we do is place a solid block here to break the redstone connection between this slab and the glass down here. So next we're just going to be bringing this signal out of this repeater here. But then we will just connect the redstone all the way up. Last but not least, of course, we can go ahead and put a button on top of this redstone lamp, and this doesn't need to be a redstone lamp, of course, it could be any solid block. So this last failsafe that we're adding actually comes from one of your suggestions. I want to give a special thanks to SA Puddles for pointing out the issue and also suggesting a solution. You may wind up in a situation where for some reason your allays aren't picking up their blocker items. Now, if you run out of shovels here, the consequences are indeed catastrophic. You'll break every single one of these filter chests eventually, and the whole system will fall apart, and it'll take a ton of time to fix everything. The lowest profile solution I can think of involves just adding a slab to this iron block and running a comparator out of it. What we'll be doing here is checking to see if this hopper is ever empty. If it's empty, then, you know, we're getting into a situation where we potentially will run out of shovels and the system will start breaking. So what we'll do is we'll actually replace this glass block with an iron block here. And then we will go to the other side, add a torch, a slab here, and a repeater. And that's all we need to do. So if this hopper ever becomes empty, what it'll do is send a signal to this dropper here, and it'll shoot the water bottle into the other dropper, which will keep the next cycle from happening. Now, what that means is you'll need to come back up here, and once you refill the shovels and, you know, fix whatever's happening with the allays, you'll need to go ahead and take the bottle back from here and put it into the left dropper again. So just keep that in mind. You'll need to manually intervene if this does ever break. Now, of course, it might also make sense here to rig this up to a redstone lamp up top or somewhere else that you can see, just so that you can see if something is broken here and you can go in and fix it yourself. Alright, so that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and further that this system helps alleviate some of the inventory management problems that are inherent to this game. Now, I may be making a follow-up video in the near future just to kind of go through some of the details of the overflow and maybe talk a little bit about the 2.1 version upgrades a little bit more. Just let me know in the comments if there's anything related to this that you want to see. I didn't really have a chance to get into overflow as much as I really would have liked to. It's pretty unlikely that you'll be running into those situations, but please give me a shout in the comments if you have any questions, especially ones related to overflow if you happen to experience them. I would be happy to get started on that video. Another thing that I just wanted to call out for the world save is that in addition to this rail guide, I will also be pasting in a lot of different sections of the system, so things like the intake for the shulker, the batcher, or even a full slice of the system, just in case you need to see those in a bit more detail. And as people have more questions, I would be happy to update this world save and paste any other guides or references in here that you may find helpful. Please reach out if you have any questions, but until next time, see you later, everybody.